Class now resumed. So, as is usually the case with me, I just kind of went ahead and did the next set of slides. So let's go through the slides, see if there's anything we missed. So, PHP code inside of an HTML document needs to be placed in special tags. These ones, or that one, apparently that's okay as well. Note, for PHP code inside of an HTML document to be executed by the server, the document still needs to have the .php file extension. If it has the .html file extension, no PHP code will be executed, even if it's present. If there's even one drop of PHP in the file, it needs to have the PHP file extension.
So, if our doc has any PHP code, it has to have a PHP extension,
Yes,
even though majority of it has HTML.
correct. Even if it's 99% HTML and you have 1% PHP, that 1% PHP still needs to be executed. The way that the thing tells if there is PHP that needs to be executed is via the file extension. So, you know, I sometimes say, you know, file extensions are fake and don't matter and you can do whatever you want with them. But every once in a while they do matter, and it's mostly when programs are reading files. So there you have it.
Dr. Moore, does,
Yep.
when the server executes the PHP, does that entire process increase the stress on the server?
Yes.
Or the cost that you have to pay to host your
Yes.
page there? So why bother using it at all?
Well, this is an interesting question, right? Because it is true that you can save money by kicking some calculations out to the client, right? If your client's computer is responsible for doing those processing steps, you're gonna see a savings on your server with an asterisk on there, only at scale, you know? Versus, you know, for the amount of PHP that we've been doing, the increased time it takes for the server to process that is very, very small. Very, very small. So it increases with the amount of PHP that you have to execute. It also, it multiplies by the number of times that page is requested, right? So if you're Facebook, for example, it makes a lot of sense to kick stuff out to the client. If you are, you know, local Al's tire and lubrication emporium business website, probably not so much, right?
Makes sense.
But yeah, everything like the time that your server, the processing time your server needs, and the memory that it takes are things you get charged for, assuming you don't own your own equipment, which most people don't these days, right? Like if you just own your own server computer, it's just there doing whatever it needs to, right? But if you're renting server time off of Amazon Web Services or something, you pay for everything you use. Make sense? So that's another trade-off. So, but the reason that you use PHP is because PHP does stuff that you can't do on the client, right? And that's kind of the trick, is you want to do stuff that you can't do on the client, which is still useful stuff, you know? But anyway, so, here we go. Before and after execution, PHP, echo test, echo break, echo yes, echo try again, right? This is after execution. You'll notice yes and try again. There's no new line break here because HTML gobbles white space, unless it's a single space, in which case it inserts a single space. But if you don't put the spaces here, they won't be inserted there. It's literally just exactly what is printed from the PHP script. Make sense? We kind of have been over this territory already. So, how do we run PHP code? We've, had several working examples already. Normally, you put the file on a web server, you load it from the web server into a client. For example, a folder home/account/public HTML on the server will be made available as somewebsite.com on the internet. So if a user accesses somewebsite.com/index.php, that will cause the PHP located there to be interpreted on the server and the results back, as we have already done so. Testing PHP locally. We've already downloaded, installed, and got XINF working, so I'm going to skip this slide, but if you want to download it from apachefriends.org, you can get the latest release. So, now let's talk about some PHP language details. So, first off, we've already talked about it. Variables at all times start with the $sign character. Variables in PHP are weakly typed and dynamically typed, similar to JavaScript and Python. So, you don't declare a variable with a particular type. It takes on the type of whatever you store in it. Similarly, values like floating point numbers can be used in operations like string concatenation without the need for explicit type conversion. As JavaScript has a triple equals operator, so too does PHP. In PHP, you can have a number of interesting things. So, all right. Here's something. Here are a few things for you. So, variable y is equal to 1, 2, 3, hello, plus 4, 5, 6, goodbye. Echo y. Does anybody want to take a guess what the answer to this will be?
1, 2, 3, hello. String.
A string saying what?
It'll be concatenated together.
1, 2, 3, hello, 4, 5, 6, goodbye.
Yeah.
Survey says,
Oh, this is hello.world and that's on CS Unix. This was the one. Non-well-formed numeric value encountered in hello world.php on line 24. So, here's a thing for you. In PHP, plus always means addition. There's a specific concatenation operator, and it's period. Dot concatenates. Plus is just addition. So,
but because it has strings, it's still alone has to be removed.
Now, here's an interesting thing, right?
It's added the numbers, but it did not, it's added the number, but the goodbye is not.
It's added the number, but it has also inserted a warning message into our bloody website. So, this should give you Another reason to love and or hate PHP, the mechanism by which you get error messages. You only get error messages as something is executing because it's an interpreted language, and it just echoes them into your web page, just like that. So if you've got a PHP error, that's where it goes. Pop! Warnings and errors. And you can see it has actually also performed this addition. It's just warning you that it's doing so, it's doing a sort of not necessarily a good type conversion. So, when it sees plus, it says this is addition. I am adding 1, 2, 3 to the numeric equivalent of 4, 5, 6 goodbye. It interprets 4, 5, 6 goodbye as only the numeric characters at the front. Therefore, 1, 2, 3, added together, 5, 7, 9. PHP!
Smarter than you think.
So, the moral of the story, don't let PHP do that. Just, as with all of these weakly typed languages, the best approach is to not rely on the weakly typed type conversions. Always make sure you know what data types you're dealing with, what operations are applicable. Annotate the variable names if you have to remember what they are. But just keep track, it's not going to keep track of your types for you, so you have to do the legwork. Otherwise, you'll just end up with all of these weird type conversion errors that you don't know where they're coming from. Well, not technically true, you do have the line numbers. But that doesn't necessarily help. So, any questions about that? Okay. So, var name a string, 34, 34.23, and true. All of these 4 data types, notice nothing is required on this side of var name, right? Comments. Comments in PHP look exactly like they do in C#, you don't have to worry, but they have to be inside of a PHP block to look like that.
Oh, it should be inside, not outside?
Right. This is a comment. This is not a comment.
So what is that? Oh.
Content.
Okay.
In fact, there is a way of doing this in HTML. Those are the comment characters for HTML. You can see it's now green. Lovely. Right? So if you're in an HTML environment, you use HTML comments. If you're in the PHP environment, you use C-style comments. Make sense? Sort of? Have I lost anybody yet? No? Okay, good. Arrays. This is a typo, it should be a square brace. Arrays we all know and love.
It says you can declare both, right? So in the square bracket or.
Or using the array function name, yeah. Now, if I wanted to be pedantic, which of course I want to be because this is the reason I chose my profession, calling these arrays is a bit of a stretch. They really are more like lists. They're not like They're not of static size. They have mutation methods and all of that sort of thing. You can add to them, you can make them longer and shorter dynamically. You remember in C# we couldn't do that with an array. An array was the size it was when you declared it, and that's it. Right?
Yeah.
Not so with these guys. These guys, you can add things to the end, you can pop things off. Okay, you can add, you can remove, delete, insert. All of these operations are possible over arrays. The one that you'll probably use most frequently is array push. Array push adds an item to the end of an array. Arrays are zero indexed and accessed in the normal manner, and assignment to an array operates in the normal manner as well. Aside from these sort of unique declaration-related issues, things work pretty much the way you should expect them. So, A is an array containing hearts, clubs, spades, and emeralds. If we wanted to print all of the contents of this array, for I is equal to 0, I is less than, count. It's slightly different here. You'll forgive me if I have to take a moment. It's like, which language are we doing this again in again? What is it called here? It's called count. Hearts, clubs, spades, emeralds. Does this make sense? This should look familiar, This is basically the way that arrays have worked so far. We just have a couple of characters exchanged for different ones, right? In C# these would have been curly braces. You would have had to declare a type here. You would have used, a.length. All of the dollar signs would be gone. Echo would be print or console log. And, you can see the correspondence, right? That's basically where we are. You'll find that PHP probably resembles C# more than JavaScript. So, JavaScript is kind of just likes to have its own little way of doing things. Any questions?
How to use array push?
Sure, Array push, you then specify which array, okay, and then you specify the value to push. For example, wizards. Wizards. As with a lot of languages, the autocomplete dropdown is very informative, which is another reason not to do everything in Nano.
So, Professor, I have a question. So array push will add into the end. What if we want to add it into the beginning?
Let's take a look.
Insert.
Insert at 0, yeah, maybe. Where is? I'm gonna have to look up.
Or is
Splice?
Splice. Ooh,
Slice?
splice.
Slice. Oh, okay.
Okay. So the array. Yeah. Ah,
So it's basically
offset
replace.
length replacement. Offset is 0, length would be 0, replacement is, uh-oh.
Diamond.
Okay, if you wanna be like that, but this, let's see if this works though. Like, if we specify the length as one item to be replaced, that might swap this one with this one, but having it as 0 is like, let's see how it works. Yep, that was an insertion operation.
Okay, thank you.
But you see how we had to actually try it to make sure? If I make the length 1, then it replaces hearts with diamonds. There is a logic
So,
behind PHP, but, yes?
so basically, we have to basically be specific that where we want to add this.
Well, insert at the beginning is like, that's a subset of all of the insert operations, right? So.
Then what about the comments to remove the one of the elements? Pop?
Pop will pop it out of the end. Um, yeah. No, I don't think it'll work. Let's see. Unset. You can also use splice. Ah, okay. So with splice, if you don't specify a replacement, it'll just delete it. Notice clubs has been deleted. kind of annoying because like splice is a word that doesn't really mean anything, and it seems to be like one of these weird Swiss Army knife functions. Splice, join or connect a rope or ropes by interweaving the strands. So it seems to only have precise definitions. Yeah, alright. That's not really what it's doing though. PHP is an annoying language because it was written by people who are like only marginally connected to real life and the English language. So like the names they chose for things are annoying and don't make sense a lot of the time. And there's literally like 5 functions to do one thing in some cases. Anyway, so that's arrays. So, hopefully all of you recall JavaScript objects, right? If you remember in JavaScript, we had a construct that looked kind of like this. A gets 1, B gets 2, C gets 3, D gets 4. Right? The JavaScript object. In PHP, we call those associative arrays. So we are associating this thing with that thing. The way that we write an associative array is as follows. AA is equal to array and then you specify these pairs. So A, arrow 1, B, arrow 2, C, arrow 3, D, arrow 4. Just to separate it out. So the question then becomes, how on earth do we get information out of such a thing? Well, like this in general. So you get stuff out of it in the same way that you get that stuff out of it in JavaScript. So how do you loop over it? I forget. That's not even useful. Get out of here. Auto snippets. That's just, they're just piping that in from ChatGPT. Like, that's not even useful.
It's a minefield up there.
Actually, it's just been taken from this website. Oh yeah. So, it's a special syntax called a for each loop. For each AA, what is it, as, with, in, through, as. And then you specify 2 variable names. Key value. This is pattern matching, by the way. Because this pattern matches that pattern. So then, if we echo key holds value, break. A holds 1, B holds 2, C holds 3, D holds 4 for each loop. Oh, I should also mention, the thing I'm doing right here is legal in PHP. Because the variable names all start with the $ character, you can literally just plop the variable name into a string, and it's okay with that. There are some exceptions and restrictions, but in general it works pretty well. Any questions? Have I lost you all? No? Are we doing okay? Yeah. These are all concepts that we have studied before. It's just, how is it that PHP presents it, right? And hopefully, we're getting to that point with programming languages in general. It's like, okay, I just need to know how to do this in this programming language. It's probably similar, but I don't know what it's called, so let me just Google that, right? Good. So, we have functions in PHP, similarly to other languages. Syntax is fairly similar to JavaScript. Function keyword, name of the function, provide a list of parameters, curly braces, and then the contents of the function. Basically exactly the same as in JavaScript. Like in JavaScript, PHP functions don't need to return a value, and no return value is specified, or return type is not specified. Questions? So, PHP contains all of your standard control structures, if statements, if else's, else ifs, or if else if else, while loops, for loops, and switch statements. All of these things are still in PHP, so you use them the way that you do in other languages. Does that make sense? So, like, we're not in HTML land here, unless, if we're inside of a PHP tag, we are in a programming language proper. Good references, the W3 Schools tutorial, and of course, php.net, which is where all of the functions are defined. So if you want to know what a function does, like for example, array push, not pass, push, there we go. Array that array pass, that might be a little bit, that's for your second assignment. Pus is a symptom.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so, you know.
Okay, second is, I thought.
Yeah.
I thought,
So, using php.net, you get what are the expected inputs, what's the probable return value, description of what it does, often has examples. If you scroll down, there's often a discussion area where people post examples as well. So php.net is actually like, you know how good the Microsoft documentation on C# was for C#? This is way, way better than that.
Oh, that one was not that previous.
Yeah, I know, this is actually useful. I refer to this frequently when I'm teaching my PHP class. Like in class. It's like, oh, hey professor, what does this function do? It's like, well, let me look it up on php.net. And then I do, and then we have our answer. And it's usually, like, this is enough information to use the actual things, you know? So, yeah, php.net, excellent resource. If you Google a PHP function, this is what will come up. Make sense? Good. Yeah. And yeah, that's it for PHP Basics. Any questions? Shall we take a moment to breathe? Don't worry, I'm not expecting you to be able to fend off hacker attacks at this point, you know. We've still only done the basics. And the most basic of basics at that. So, I have already given you an example of this in class, but let's formalize that knowledge. The entire purpose of PHP scripts is to handle incoming HTTP requests. These requests will have information attached to them. Only very rarely do you request a PHP script without having any additional information attached. For our purposes, we are primarily interested in GET and POST requests, as discussed previously in class. So, the HTTP protocol enables clients to send multiple different verbs for different request types. GET and POST are two of them. Other verbs include put and delete, and we'll get there when we talk about REST APIs later on in the course. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. When you type a URL into a browser and hit enter, that is a GET request. Often, but not always, when submitting a form, a POST request will take place. So, quick review. What are the advantages and where would you use GET? Where would you use POST? What are the differences?
For posts, it's a kind of onload data to this.
That's true. So the purpose, sometimes technical jargon makes its way into the vernacular. When you post something to social media, you are using a POST request to do so most of the time. It is a post, something posted. Something to do with, the mail system, I guess. GET is normally a request for information rather than rather than putting something into it, you're taking something from it. But in terms of technical details, the parameters that are set by GET are publicly visible to anybody who sees the packet because they're encoded in the URL. So, you do not encode your bank username and password in a GET request. because then every server that your packet travels through knows your bank password. Post requests place the important information in the encrypted payload, which means it's, well, as safe as something can be on the internet. Post requests are also of theoretically unlimited size and are appropriate for sending things like images to the server, whereas it would be just about impossible to use a GET request for that, unless the image was very, very small. GET requests can be cached, bookmarked, and remain in browser history, but they should never be used for sensitive data, and they can only send a limited amount of data. Like, if you bookmark a link and that link contains a GET request, you are also bookmarking the GET request. Post requests are never cached, cannot be bookmarked, and do not remain in browser history. They are correct for sensitive data and have no data limit. GET requests can have URL parameters, that is to say query parameters, which send key value pairs to the server. So, this is the form. Please pay attention, as once we start doing AJAX, you'll have to be able to write these yourself in JavaScript. So, if I have website.com/hello.php, right? That does not send any parameters. I put the I put the question mark symbol in there. Suddenly, this now has parameters. So the parameters occur as key value pairs. So key 1 equals value 1. We've already seen an example of that in class so far. If you want to send more than one, you include the ampersand character. And then you can do key 2 equals value 2. And if you wanted to do more than that, you just chain together as many ampersands as you want to send as many of these guys as you want. The only limitation is, I think you have to get it under like 4,000 characters or something for a URL. Whatever the URL limit is, that's the limit. So, does that make sense? We can see a couple of examples of these in the wild. YouTube uses GET requests to fetch videos. So, for example, goodness me, where's just a good little lo-fi video? I should have known better than, clicking on YouTube. Anyway, this one, because I always do this one, or something like it. Except it's a live stream. I don't want a live stream, I want like an actual video. Sure, this one. So, you'll notice at the top there, V equals MMKGUZ, etc., etc. That's the video identification number. V means video, this one. Now, there are other interesting things you can do with these. For example, you can copy a video URL at a current time. When we do that, let's take a look at what that looks like in Notepad. You'll see that we now have a T parameter. The T parameter tells us how far into the video should we start playing. That's another parameter. So,
Change
If-
this parameter, then it's gonna show you that which one.
precisely. So if you say, and T is equal to 120, starts at exactly 2 minutes in, 120 seconds. Parameters. Does that make sense? That's get. That's a get parameter. So there is a PHP script called watch. Well, it's not necessarily PHP they're using. There's a script called watch, which is receiving these parameters, serving the request, sending out the correct video at the specified time. Does that make sense? URL parameters can tell a script how to behave as well. For example, if we have myscript.php and a variable called sort by, price or date could be two possible values. Make sense? PHP receives URL parameters in a global get array that is populated by the server. So you don't have to worry about putting the contents of the get array together. That is done for you by the server. For example, if the user requests the following in the script, columns equals 10 and rows equals 20, when my script is interpreted, the get array contains columns 10, rows 20. Similarly to that example that we did. And is he going to talk about input filtering? Nope. Okay. Well, that's bonus material that's necessary to not get hacked. So. So, let's talk about post requests then. Post requests allow the form data, also query string. You can do query strings as well. But post requests also send the same information to the server, just differently. A form set up as a post request with inputs and names, name, username, and name password, would get sent to the script as username and password equals the values entered by the user. The way that you get those parameters is using the, you guessed it, post superglobal. Post at name is whatever the user entered, and post at email is whatever the user entered. Right? Assuming in this particular form, we've got name and email as our two input text boxes, right? Whatever the user enters here gets put there, whatever they enter here gets there in the PHP script. Again, we're not filtering anything in this example, and we should be, but this is just the basic mechanism.
So this is the good example that you showed earlier when Phil asked about
Yes.
the hacking.
This is hackable. All someone would need to do is enter a cross-site scripting attack into this text box, and you've been hacked. You've been hacked, son. But, you know, this is, again, you see how this is like, it's a language where you can know just enough to get yourself in trouble. Did they do any courses on cybersecurity with you guys?
No, I think we have it in
Oh,
We have a number of electives, Dr. Moore, that are undefined, so
Oh,
it could be AI, it could be ad, it could be whatever we want.
no.
I would like to do that, just to have an exposure to it. I think most of us would like to do that in Siren.
Yeah. I want to.
If I may make a recommendation for like you guys in this program,
Yes, please.
I would say probably, although AI is like the sexy new subject, you know, the money is good in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Understanding like the principles of cybersecurity and not only like, okay, so there's cybersecurity and then there's cybersecurity, right? There's like diagrams of like, you know, this is how you do a threat, like rollout thing, and like there's a policies and procedures angle, right? That's one thing. That doesn't even necessarily require hard programming skills. If you know how to stop, if you know how to deal with cybersecurity threats at the level of the programming, fundamentally that's where they're all originating anyways. So, you know, the technical skill is the higher order skill, in my opinion. But, you know, not that policy isn't necessary, I guess, but basically, this is, you know, I'm an engineer, right? I come from an engineering background. Engineers hate bureaucrats. There's an ancient animosity between engineers and bureaucrats. So it's like, you've got the bureaucratic approach, which is policy, policy, policy. And then you've got the engineering approach, which is just do something about it. You know? So my goal is that you guys should actually be able to do something about it. I don't know which, you know, which of those skills the cybersecurity electives that you are considering would be.
I don't know,
But,
because we don't have access to these courses until later
Yeah,
on.
not even course descriptions.
It says we have to do 4 electives, each semester in the end.
It doesn't say anything.
define what or
It says liberal studies.
Liberal studies?
Oh, those are going to be breadth electives, aren't they?
yes.
You might not be getting cybersecurity as one of those then. It's going to be like, yeah, you're going to have to take, you know,
It says related
schmaltzy, touchy-feely humanities courses or something.
Ooh.
humanities.
I know.
Sciences,
Oh,
humanities,
I have
sciences,
fun.
social sciences, global cultures,
Yeah.
indigenous cultures, and mathematics.
What if you have?
Oh, math is in there, thank God. I'm not sure how they managed to argue math into a breadth elective for a computer science degree, but
I think that's for all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
good Lord, yes.
that's awful.
All 4 of them are elective, yes. You are right, Grandma.
Okay. Well, so it goes.
In that case, I'm just taking the most basic one, sorry.
I'm going to do basic
Humanities.
myself.
Yeah, try to glide through without dedicating too many neurons. That way you can save them for the important stuff, like programming. You know, the stuff that requires neurons.
Social sciences.
Not that I have any kind of negative impression whatsoever of humanities courses. I know many people who've taken humanities courses, and they're not completely terrible people. Ha 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 ha. Anyway, I feel it's always necessary for me to inject a little bit of STEM chauvinism. So we've got the get superglobal, and we've got the post superglobal. There are lots of these things, actually. There are many different superglobals. Each of them allow you to retrieve different information from the server. Another important one is the request array. The request array will be populated with whatever query string key value pairs were provided, either by GET or POST request. This allows us to interpret key value pairs independently of the request type. So if it doesn't matter to you at all, whether it's coming by GET or POST, the request superarray does both, or a superglobal does both. You also have one called server, which will tell you lots of things, such as what the request method actually was. For example, server request method. Which request method was used to access the page? Get, add, post, put, etc. Request time, the timestamp. Remote address, the IP address from which the user is currently viewing the page. Server script file name, the file name of the PHP script which has been requested. All of this information can be made available to you if you need it. So, you remember the cross-site scripting attack example we talked about? One of the things, like the goal of that was to steal a session cookie so that a person like the hacker can be logged into your account as well. Two different computers logged into one server. If you're receiving requests from two different IP addresses at the same time, probably there's a problem, right? Now, this is actually not as good of a trap as it used to be for hackers because of these things. Ooh. There we go. So, on a cell phone, right, most people do most of their internet access through one of these things these days. These things are constantly jumping from mobile data to like local wireless network, between one wireless network and another. Maybe it's different routers on the same wireless network. Every time this thing flips between two routers, its IP address changes. Right? So, IP address is not the golden standard that it used to be able to detect multiple people logged in from multiple places. But, to give you, a taste of the kind of countermeasures you can set up, the things you can check for, right? Does this make sense? So basically, when you look at your network packet, in the header, all of this information and more is available to the server. It has been sent with the packet. And that's how you get that information out of the game. Does that make sense? Well, this might be the response, actually. Anyway, you get the idea. Yes.
So Dr. Moore,
Yeah.
having said that, technically, you should be able to filter traffic coming in for example, if you have an app on your phone and the app knows you're in Hamilton in Ontario, but then there's another request coming from Europe,
Botswana
yes,
or something, yeah,
from Africa.
yes, or
It
Kyoto
should-
or something, yeah.
Sure, it should be intelligent enough to realize that, oh, Dr. Moore was here with his phone in Canada, but then 5 minutes later, Botswana's signaling to come in.
Yes, and this is often the type of tracking that they do these days. You don't often run into it, but you know how you're supposed to like call to let your credit card company know if you're traveling internationally? Ever wonder why? It's because they're doing that type of filtering on your because I don't know if it's HTTP packets that are sending credit card requests. So I kind of doubt it that it's HTTP. It's probably some other protocol, but like it's going to be something similar to this. You're going to have a packet header that's going to have geographic location. It's going to have IP address of the machine that's trying to perform a credit card transaction. All of those pieces of interaction are read by the server, and you can do security checks and filtering and that sort of thing. Absolutely. And yeah, so yes, absolutely. The problem is that your positioning is not necessarily terribly precise. If your device has location data enabled, then your actual GPS location for the packet that you're sending could be sent, which, as information privacy goes, I don't recommend enabling location data on anything. Possibly not even your Maps application, right? You can get directions from one place to another without even knowing where you actually are, right? Although it's useful, but understand what you're giving up, right? They know where you are. Now, it's also the aggregate data of all of these little blips of people and how fast they're moving through a city's roads. That's how Google Maps calculates like traffic density, and that is useful, I guess. But anyway, so all of that information is available to the server. PHP self contains the name of the PHP script. When we do a post request, we often reference the name of our script as the action to take or what to request. This becomes useful when we can use it to reference the name of the script independent of the file name. We can then rename the file without breaking our PHP code. That's a big, long technical description of an operation that Kevin probably had to perform 20 times to get it right or something. Sorry, Kevin. Probably true. So I would like to take a minute now to talk about how PHP scripts are normally organized from like a top level perspective. One web application will often have multiple PHP scripts, right? Imagine something like YouTube. You can imagine YouTube has lots of PHP scripts going on in there, right?
Yeah.
So, like, how do we think about a PHP script? What is a PHP script, right? Like, we know what a class is in C#, right? It's a description of an object. In PHP, one PHP script is an action to be taken by the server. So, you know my tic-tac-toe example, right? Send move is a PHP script. That's an action, right? Retrieve game state, that's an action. Clear board, that's an action. Those are all individual PHP scripts. So you almost think of them as functions, right? We're kind of really strongly not in object-oriented territory on this one. PHP doesn't really like objects, it doesn't know what to do with objects, its syntax for objects is terrible. It's best to just not think about objects when you're in PHP. Think about things in terms of functions. Linear programming and functions. And a PHP script is correctly thought of as a function that the client can call on the server. In that context, the information traveling in the packet, including the get parameters and post parameters that we might set, these are all arguments to the function. But that's the level of abstraction we're talking about here, right? We should think of a PHP script as being closer to a method or a function than anything else. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, form handling and superglobals. Yes, W3 schools and W3 schools. Very good. Any questions? Okay. I think we have time for an example. Let's make a new PHP script, folks. Let's make a new PHP script and call it I don't know, ice cream .php. So we're going to take two things and click them apart now. Our index page is going to be different from the script that handles the request coming from that page. So let's make an HTML file as well and call it ice cream.html. Now, I am going to make a form. The purpose of this form will be to send information, a request, to icecream.php and get some response from the server. So, I feel I have to sign this. Pardon me, thank you. So, in order for the form to know which PHP, like what thing on the server it should be sending to, it has an action attribute. Here, we specify the name of the PHP file we want to reference, icecream.php. We then additionally can specify the type of request we wish to send. Method is equal to post, for example. Now, anything that's collected up inside of this web form will be sent via post when the submit button is clicked. But oh ho, we do not yet have a submit button. Input type is equal to submit. Value is equal to get or send request. So, oh, this is gonna be in, I'm making this here. I'm just copying it over to XAMPP. There we go. Ice cream.html. We sent, so let's take a look at the inspector pane. Get the network tab open. Send request. There we go. Request is sent. We get a blank page back. You can see this is all of the information that was sent when that button was clicked. But there's no information being sent yet. So let's add some text boxes. Input type is equal to text. Name is equal to my name. Input type is equal to text. Name is equal to my ice cream. Put some breaks in there to make it look nice. Even though you're not supposed to use breaks. Using breaks is okay if you're programming in PHP. Oh man. I need to open it up in htdocs. This is embarrassing. There we go. Ice cream.html. There we go. Save. And now in Chrome, you can see we have our two text boxes. Name. Ice cream. There you go. Now, when I enter values, ice cream there we go. In our payload, you can see my name is Nick, my ice cream is pralines and cream. Now, on the PHP side, let us prepare to receive these parameters. Now, I know that the slides use the superglobals, but I'm going to do it the proper way, so that you can see the proper way of doing it. Filter input. Type is, anybody got a guess?
Type is text.
Nope. One of,
Oh, input, yes, because
are we sending by get or by post?
Post.
So we're using
post.
input post. There we go. put post. Next, the name as being sent by the client, which will be my name. Oh, and as in JavaScript, single quotes, double quotes doesn't really matter in PHP. Okay? Like it does in some cases, but not really as far as we're getting into it. Now, filter default. Basically, you type the word filter, underscore, and then you get all of these options. You just kind of have to memorize it, but the one for strings is sanitize special chars. Copy, paste, ice cream variable, my ice cream. Maybe. You have to consult. Yes, that's how I spelled it. So, if there is a spelling error or an inconsistency between the name given here and the name looked for in your PHP here, it will fail to find it. Does that make sense? Then you can do something like, I hear that name likes ice cream flavored toadstools. Ew. Which is, you know, you can tell I have young children, right? So, back we go. Send request. And there you have it. Obviously, there's more that you can do with this, right? Maybe I have, you know, maybe it only outputs this if name is equal to Nick, and at all other times it says like the nice version. Right? In that case, if you send Nick, it gets this response, and if you say, you know, for example, for Steve, it's the nice version. Right? Like you have programming. You have programming available to you. Also, interesting little detail. When you're working on the PHP script alone, you don't have to reload the page for changes to take effect. Yes. Any new requests that are sent to the page from the page will automatically get whatever the version is of the PHP on the web page. So you don't have to reload the browser. There's nothing on the client side that's changed, right? Only the server side has changed. Does that make sense? Cool. Anything anybody wants to see? Any questions?
correct file for the assignment? Can you check that or? no?
Yeah, but I'm not gonna check it here, because I don't have that.
Okay, then, so can you move back to the
Oh, sorry.
code?
Yes, of course.
Page 5.
Let me just. There we go.
The grades are posted as a sidebar
Or no?
For.
for the update of the grades.
Oh,
Okay.
good. Yeah, apparently it wasn't our office, it was their office, so. Of course, how many times are you told that, right? The problem was on their end. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
There you go. Well, I mean, you did earn the grades, so you should have grades, right? Did everybody get this working? Good. Man, 4-hour class, I really do feel like I run out of steam towards the end of it. It's a marathon, but I'm a sprinter, you know? Did you get it working? Awesome. So, do you guys still think that the course is better than Unity?
I believe it's the,
How many languages?
Yeah.
in one semester.
If it were up to me, I would probably I'd probably throw out the last 5 or 6 weeks of the course and just hammer what we've done so far hard, so that like maybe the last 3 weeks we do PHP, you know? But there are learning outcomes that need to be met, unfortunately. So
Do we have a test?
we have a test in week 10, so not for a bit.
It's gonna be similar to the programming professor.
Well, yes. You have me, so you know what to expect. I tend to do my tests in a fairly similar fashion. Ah,
There's,
I know exactly what the problem is. Submit. Every time, eh? There you go.
Okay, thank you.
It's very persnickety, isn't it? Okay, well, I think we're just gonna wrap up this example and I'm gonna stop the recording.